you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today is going to be the update to the Harvester build, the Stamina Necromancer for the Scalebreaker DLC. Now this was originally made in Elsewhere one patch ago when the Necromancer was released, and we have had some substantial combat changes since then. But don't worry, we've got this covered. This has actually performed a little bit better than it did on the previous patch. Now, this is, of course, with all player skill levels in mind. So there are going to be alterations to the gear if you don't have what is used on this particular build, so you can still perform just fine. I am going to explain how everything works. Everything is going to slot in quite nicely, especially when I get to the skills and the passive. So stick with it and you will understand it. If you don't stick with it and you just try and spam buttons, sure, it'll look nice, but you won't be as effective. So first of all, let's pop a potion, go into our stats. We are on 10k max magicka, 16k max health, and 33.7k max stamina. We're sitting on 1651 stam recovery, which is enormous. We're on almost 12k spell resistances and 11.5k physical resist. That can go up obviously with a resistance buff from your group or yourself if you choose to slot one. Our weapon damage is on 4.1k, but that goes way over 6. And our weapon critical chance is 56.7, but again, that goes much, much higher. But we'll get to that as the video goes along. Now, we are using 5 points into max health to make sure we can hit that 16k, and 59 points into max stamina. Now, listen to this part very, very carefully. We are, of course, using lava foot soup and salt rice food. Now, this generally is used a lot on target dummies to simulate some form of sustain, and the misinformation out there is that if you take points out of stamina and put it into health, you can use this in combat, and that's fine. You'll get the same numbers. False. Can you still use it? Yes. Will you get the same numbers? No. Because your resource pool contributes towards your maximum damage output, regardless of what your build is. So if you do drop stamina, you will reduce the effectiveness of your skills. That's a fact. It's not a major end of the world kind of scenario, but that will happen. So what we've done deliberately to be able to utilize this food, which is max stam and recovery with no health bonuses, we've actually altered our gear a little bit, and we've altered 5 points into health to make sure we can hit 16k. If you want to go less health, you will be squishier, it will be risky, but you can put 5 points here into stamina. Your maximum stamina will go up and you will see a small increase in your overall damage output. But the choice is yours. If you choose to drop points in stamina to gain more health, that is also a choice of yours, but you have to consider stamina reduction will mean damage reduction. But for this build, we're not just using the food on the dummy for the sake of it, we are actually using this with a balanced amount of health, and I will demonstrate at the end a DPS kind of rotation, if you like, with this all in place. It won't be 64 points into stamina, none in health, extra health glyph, and some cheesy food. It will be 100% flat out what we are actually taking to our groups. Now, we are using the Shadow Munderstone, of course, for 19% increased critical damage, and we do crit a lot. And, of course, we're a vampire, but I will go over those passives when we come to the passive section. Now, I'm going to explain the skills in detail, as I always do. If you skip this part, you're at risk of asking questions that have already been answered, and if you do so, I won't be answering them in the comment section below. So stick with it, I will explain everything, be patient, don't worry, it's all covered. Now first up is Blast Bones, Blighted Blast Bones in fact. Go to Gravelord, it's the second ability to unlock, starts off as Blast Bones, morph it to Blighted Blast Bones. This is very, very cheap, especially with our passives. What this does is this launches a skeleton at the target that you choose, and it explodes, and hits all enemies in area of effect if they are within range. Now the radius is 6 meters around the skeleton itself, and the range you can fire it from is 28 meters, so you don't actually have to be in the enemy's face, although we are kind of melee, so this does actually hit from really close range anyway. But basically, this is very, very simple. Here's a skeleton. Boom. Everything here gets hit. That is mental. It's a very, very strong skill. We are going to use this as much as we possibly can, but just bear in mind there is a 2.5 second wind-up time for this before it dives in and explodes. So as you can see here, 2.5, go. It's tricky if you are not familiar with it. But the thing is, when you fire this, you can't fire another one straight away because it grays out. So if you look at my skill, it's grayed out until it explodes. Then I can fire another one. So how do we make this work in our rotation? Well, in our rotation, you want to make sure you take advantage of that delay and put in 2 skills per blast bones. So, for argument's sake, we're just going to spam rend and slashes twice here. Like Rendin, like Rendon, like Blast Bones. See? It fits perfectly. So 2 skills that are insta-cast, and then a Blast Bones. That will make more sense when we get to the rotation itself, but that is how you defeat the grayed out skeleton, oh my god, I don't know what to do next. Put a skill that is not channeled and is not timed in between this twice. Not the same one necessarily, 2 different ones is fine, but you must have 2 skills every Blast Bones. Next up is Barb Trap. This is in the Fighters Guild skill line. It's the 5th ability to unlock. Used to be called Rearm and Trap, but is no longer the case. It's now called Barbed Trap from Beast Trap. Morph from Beast Trap to Barbed Trap. This used to last 6 seconds, and then rearm for a further 6, and during its whole duration would do physical damage to one target, immobilize them if they could be immobilized, and give you minor force the whole time. This does still do physical damage to the single target, it does still give you minor force for the duration, but it lasts 18 seconds, not 6. So this is massive. Damage output for this is actually really, really high, and also the uptime on minor force is actually more. So this is very, very nice. Keep it in your rotation at all times, very simple. Place it on the ground, there's a trap, anything caught inside of it will take damage over time. But, again, it's single target, not multiple. Next up is Detonating Siphon. This is in the Gravelord skill line as well as our Blighted Blast Bones. It's a 5th ability to unlock, so it takes some time to get. Now this starts off as Shocking Siphon, but you want to morph it to Detonating Siphon, because this one does disease damage, and since we're spec'd for stamina and weapon damage, this one obviously benefits us more than the other morph. Now, this doesn't cost anything. No stamina cost whatsoever, but it does require you to have a body on the floor. You must consume a corpse to use this. Now, it does damage over time for 12 seconds in a small area of effect, but if any enemies are caught inside the beam that this projects, they will take damage also. And then when it's finished, it will explode. Not only that, while slotted, your damage done will be increased by 3%. So all of your damage done is increased by 3%. And that is why you find people slotting on the back bar when they're killing skeletons to make it look better. Now, you can get away with that, of course, if you're not using any Healy skills, but I wouldn't recommend it. It depends on your group. You could get away with it in some situations. But it's minimal anyway. It's a tiny damage increase. But this is actually really, really nice. Keep this on your front bar at all times. All you need to do is find a corpse. Now, the way to do that is to kill something, or your Blast Bones actually puts a body on the ground. Boom, there's a body. So we'll consume it for free. And everything is getting nuked with area of effect. Now, what did I say about the beam? Other targets caught in the beam will get affected by it. Very, very nice indeed. Keep it in your rotation at all times and let it run out. You see that explosion at the end? We want that explosion. Let it run out. Now, next up is Venom Skull. This is in the Gravelord skill line. Starts off as Flame Skull, morph it to Venom Skull. This is very, very simple. This does poison damage and single target. There's a skull. It hit him in the face. Amazing. Now, you'll notice the third hit is 2 hands, not 1. It's a much, much bigger skull and it hits much harder. Why? That is because every third cast of this ability will deal 20% more damage, so it simulates that kind of extra boost. It's got 2 hands fire instead of 1, but you don't have to fire this particular skill to do so. You can fire any Necromancer abilities while this is on the bar, and they will contribute towards each individual cast. So, you can fire Blast Bones, you can fire Detonating Siphon, and that will clock up 2. We still need 1 more, don't we? A third one. Well, this can actually count as the third cast. You can rack up 3 and then fire this, or you can rack up 2 and this will be the third. Now, that's very, very simple to apply. Instead of using 3 of these and then consuming the last one, you just use other Necromancer abilities. So there's your Blast Bones, there's your Detonating Siphon. As you can see, we've racked up 2 already. There's the third. Now, how our rotation is set up, we are actually going to be able to fire off the third strength, if you like, skull, the 20% one, every single rotation at least once. So that's going to be really, really handy. Yes, of course, you could spam this, but Blast Bones actually hits a lot harder, and this is going to be a nice kind of filler while we're waiting for our Blast Bones to be able to be reapplied. Now, next up is Rendon Slashes. This is very important, of course. This is in a dual wield skill line. This is damage over time. It's a bleed effect. Bleeds no longer ignore physical resistances. So you will need to have penetrating values in your group, in your setup, and all that good stuff to make sure you actually do the most damage you possibly can with it. But this is the second ability you unlock. Starts off as Twin Slashes, morph it to Rendon Slashes. Now, if you feel squishy, you can morph this to Blood Craze instead. The damage over time is exactly the same. It lasts for 10 seconds. It does physical damage over time, but the initial hit, instead of being about 3.1k, will actually be about 2.4, 2.5. So the initial hit once every 10 seconds will be a little bit less. And in return, you'll heal once every 2 seconds. So you've got the one that's got the initial hit slightly stronger, or you've got the heal version. The choice is yours. The damage output between the two is actually so close you won't even notice it. But again, it's up to you. Now, there is a situation occasionally where you might want to swap this out. So if you're in AoE situations, there's lots and lots and lots of ads and you want to help finish them really, really quickly, you could switch to Whirl and Blades, which is Whirlwind to start with, morph it to Whirl and Blades. Close quarter AoE, so 6 meters around you, you can actually use a execute to kill things really, really quickly. So you can spam this and everything will get hit and they'll die really, really fast, which is nice. But that is very select to certain situations. You won't be using that on single target. Also, you can swap it out for Ruinous Scythe. This comes from the Bone Tyrant skill line. It's the first ability to unlock. Starts off as Death Scythe, morph it to Ruinous Scythe, but this actually heals you. And also, every third cast will knock everything off balance. That is capped to 6, by the way. The hits are not capped, so you can hit as many as you want. Hit them all if you want, if you can reach them. It's a conal AoE, and every single hit can provide a heal. As you can see there, I'm getting healed for like 11k a hit. Occasionally if I crit them. It's mental. But again, this is situational. If you want to use this to heal off of, or you want to use it to spam AoE, it's entirely up to you. But for the most part, we'll be using Rend and the Slashes. How the heal works with this, by the way, is that you'll get a big heal to start with for the first enemy hit, and then you'll get additional heals for every other enemy hit up to 5 enemies. So this is really, really important, and it does scale off your max health as well. So obviously the higher the health, the stronger it is, but for us, it's just a case of hitting more targets. And again, every third one will knock 6 targets off balance. Now, next up is Flawless Dawnbreaker. This is our main ultimate on our front bar. We do not actively use this unless the boss is nearly dead and you don't have enough for your back bar ultimate. Now, this is in a Fighters Guild skill line. Very simple. Just put it on your bar, leave it there, and you will get a passive in the Fighters Guild section, which I will explain, and that is why it's there. However, if you do activate this, you will get 300 increased weapon damage for 20 seconds, and you'll do a damage over time to the target that you hit, as well as an initial hit as well in physical damage. So it is actually bloody strong, but we want to make sure we take advantage of our back bar ultimate for the most part. This is only used as a cheap finisher if the boss is almost dead and you can't fire your Colossus. That may not make sense right now, but it will do when we get there. So you do need Fighters Guild 10 for this, by the way. It starts off as Dawnbreaker, morph it as Flawless Dawnbreaker. Next up is Disgusting. Necrotic Potency. Very, very mental, this skill. This is in the Bone Tyrant skill line. It's the third ability you unlock. It starts off as Bitter Harvest, morph it to Necrotic Potency. It's got a little bit of a buff because the heal wasn't quite up to par in the last patch, but they've updated it. So what this does, basically, is if you consume a dead body, which is on the ground, you will gain, for each body, 6 ultimate, and almost 700 heal a second for 2 seconds per corpse. And this also scales off of your max health. So just bear in mind, if you're a tank, then you have lots and lots of health, and the heal is going to be bigger. But for us, we want it for the passive heal, which is quite nice, and of course the ulti gain. While slotted, by the way, your damage taken is reduced by 3%. So while you're on the back bar, you actually take less damage. Now, how does this work? Very simple. Here is a Blast Bones. There's a body. Consume it. Gain ultimate and a heal, which was 732 then every tick. Now if there's more bodies, you get more of them. So we'll get our other pet out, which we haven't sport just yet, but we're going to. And our Blast Bones as well. Body. 2 bodies. 2 lots of ultimate and 2 heals. As you can see, the duration is longer, so we've got 4 ticks instead of 2. The more bodies, the better. And this means we can spam our ultimate much, much more often, especially in situations where there are lots and lots of ads and they're dying very quickly. And of course, you can do that to a player as well. But we'll get to that once we get to the ultimate, and you can see how mental it is to build up ultimate really, really fast. Also consider, by the way, of course, Blast Bones does create a corpse on the ground. And we do consume it with Detonating Siphon. You can't use the Necrotic Potency on the same body twice. So you can't use it one to consume with one skill and then consume the ultimate afterwards. But we've already got that covered in our rotation. So do not panic. We will be able to take full advantage of both skills. We are deliberately placing corpses to take advantage of that dot and that ulti gain, and we're not going to lose anything. Next up is, of course, Poison Injection, this is in the bow skill line. It's the 5th ability to unlock. Starts off as Poisonous Arrow, or Poison Arrow in fact. Morph it to Poison Injection. This is very, very simple. Single target damage over time on the target. Poison Arrow doing damage every second. 2 seconds in fact. But also consider this is kind of a passive execute, because although it lasts 10 seconds and does damage over time, the lower the target's health, the stronger this gets. This can deal up to 100% more damage to enemies at lower health. So it gets stronger and stronger and stronger the longer the fight goes on. So the lower their health, the more you do. Really, really helpful. Don't let this run out if you can help it. Next up is Consuming Trap. This got altered so much. Soul Magic, you have this when you start the game. Morph it to Consuming Trap. This now does damage based off of your maximum resources. So if you have high magic, this will do magic damage. If you have high stamina, this will do physical damage. This is based off of your resources. So, because we're spec'd into stamina and weapon damage and all that good stuff, this does physical damage over time for 10 seconds. It's incredibly strong. And if the enemy dies, you will actually get back 20% of all 3 resources. Health, magic, and stamina. This is mental. Now, just a note, by the way, Necrotic Potency can be swapped out for Echoing Vigor. I did miss that part. This did get altered. 15-meter radius heal over time for you and your group. Very, very strong indeed. The Resolving Vigor version is much stronger, but it's a single target only. So this is really nice. But again, don't spam it. That's if you don't want to build Ultimate and you feel a little bit squishy. It's a choice for you. Next up is, of course, our pet. Very nice. From the Gravelord skill line, Skeletal Archer. Starts off as Skeletal Mage, morph it to Skeletal Archer so it does the physical version of it, not the lightning version. Now, this is a single target smasher. He hits one target of your choice. So if you are fighting a boss, he will obviously hit the boss. But if you're fighting loads of ads and you want to be specific about which one he hits, make sure you heavy attack the target while he's up. Then he will know that that's the one you're supposed to hit. Now, what this does, this did get a little bit reduced in damage output, but it's still incredibly high. This will summon a Skeletal Archer for you, and he will fight alongside you and do single target damage over 16 seconds in the form of, well, basically what look like light attacks, but they are really, really, really strong. Now, of course, to add to that, every time the archer deals damage, its next attack will do 5% more damage than its previous. So the longer the duration on this, the stronger it gets. So make sure this lasts as long as it can possibly last. Don't apply it and reapply it and reapply it and reapply it, because it's going to just stay weak. Make sure it tries, at least, to last its full duration or almost its full duration. Now, next up is Arrow Barrage. This is in our bow skill line. It's the second ability to unlock. Starts off as Volley, morph it to Arrow Barrage. Now, this has a much, much wider area of effect than Endless Hail, but doesn't last as long. So it hits more targets, it does more damage, but doesn't last anywhere near as long. So if you are slow with your rotations, you might want to swap to Endless Hail instead to keep the uptime, so that you can get a much, much smoother or average damage output. But if you are experienced, yes, you will have downtime on this, but you will get more damage out of it if you can utilize it in your rotation properly. Really, really powerful indeed. But whichever morph you choose is honestly at the moment up to you. Now, finally, Pestilent Colossus. This is Malcolm. He is bloody mental. This is the only version of this debuff or buff or boost to your group that exists in the game at the moment. So this is really, really useful. You must use this as much as you can. Starts off as Frozen Colossus, morph it to Pestilent Colossus for the physical version of it, the disease damage version. Now, what does this do? This makes a giant Colossus come out of the ground, smack everything in AoE, and the targets affected by these slams on the ground will be affected with major vulnerability. Not minor, not 8%, major. Which means every single person hitting those targets that are affected by this debuff or buff to you, whichever you want to call it, will actually do 30% more damage to the targets. So this isn't a buff just for us. This is a buff for your entire group. If anyone is hitting the target that was slapped by this ultimate, all of your group's damage will go up. So, every class has their own minor buff. So, the Templar has minor spell damage, so your group can benefit from that. Your Dragon Knights have minor brutality. Nightblades have minor savagery. Sorcerers have minor prophecy. Wardens have minor toughness, and these all benefit your group. The Necromancer, what they bring to the table is major vulnerability, increasing everyone's damage. Now, how does this apply? Very, very simple. First of all, it costs 225 ultimate, which on paper looks a bit expensive, but just bear in mind we do, of course, have necrotic potency, and every single rotation we will get a lot of ultimate, so we can use it a lot. But here he is. This is Malcolm. All you need to do is fire that. Now, it hits 3 times. As you can see here, it will hit with 3 smashes, and each smash over the 3 seconds will give you 3 seconds of major vulnerability. So every shot of this will redo that timer. So it looks like 3 seconds on paper, 3 seconds of major vulnerability, but in fact it's not. It's actually around 6 if you consider the last hit will reapply the 3-second uptime. So you have 3 seconds worth of him smashing and then 3 seconds worth of it persisting on the target. So we'll just build some ulti here. We might actually... no, I was going to skip this part, but I won't. I'll just consume these bodies and show you how quickly you can build ultimate while in combat. But just bear in mind, of course, you can't consume the skeletal archer unless he's been up for at least 8 seconds. But once he has, you can then take it off him. So keep that up. See that his timer goes down to 7 and then just recast and consume. Now that 225 or 235, whichever ultimate it was, what was it, 225? That does look like a lot, like I said, but it's just on paper. We're actually building ultimate really, really fast. Now, how many targets can it hit? Lots of them. Boom, boom, everybody's dead. 1, 2, 3, gone. 6-second uptime on major vulnerability on every single one of those. So on this dummy over here, you can actually end up using 3 of those, sometimes 4, which will end up giving you a overall 18-second uptime on major vulnerability. If you've got multiple necromancers, that's a mess. It's really, really strong. But just remember, this is the only class in the game that can provide that to your group. This is why we don't use this ultimate. We want to use this one to buff our group and, of course, our own damage output. It's really, really nice. Now we're going to go into passives. Gravelord's very important, of course. We're using a lot of these abilities on our front bar. Now, reusable parts is very important. When you cast a Blast Bones, a Skeletal Mage, or a Spirit Mender, and they last their full duration or explode or get killed or whatever, when they die, your next one will be 25% cheaper. So this here and this here for us. So you'll see a Blast Bones here. Now look at my buffs in the bottom there. Look carefully. This just came up because he blew up. So my next one is cheaper. Now let's cast it so I don't have the reduction to cost. Should be 1.5k there. If we cast it, it should usually cost 2. But we get a reduction. Now, because we've got that buff, it stays with us forever. It doesn't run out. As long as you fired one, it doesn't run out. So yes, you can preempt it. Our Skeletal Mage on the back bar is also cheaper. That's now down to 2.4 instead of what would be 3.3, which is expensive. So make sure you've got your reusable parts passive running. It's really, really important to do so. Next up, of course, is increases your critical strike chance against enemies under 25% health by 10% for each Gravelord ability slotted. Yes, that does mean for every one of these skills on your bar, you get 10% crit chance at low health. So what are we on at the moment? We are currently on... Let's get a potion. We're currently on 56.7. So if we get minor savagery from the Nightblade, yes, this is simulated as though it's got all class bonuses with it, except for the necro. We actually have 62.7. When it comes to execute, we have a 30% increase, which means, how good are you at maths? 92.7% crit chance. That is nuts. Absolutely insane. Yes, of course, you can get it to 100%, so you can basically just never fail, but that would involve you putting another one of those skills on your bar and obviously reducing your overall damage output for the actual fight itself. So you could, of course, put this on your bar. You could even put your pet on your front bar if you chose to do so, but it's a little bit awkward inside the rotation. And if you did that, yeah, you go to 100% crit chance. But 92%, you're not going to miss. It's really, really good. Now, while you have a Gravelord ability active, your spell and physical penetration are increased by 1500. So, our penetration is actually higher than it would be just using a sharpened weapon flat out in our passive. And all we have to do is have this active or this active, or our pet active. And we've got the passive penetration bonus. This helps us with our champion points because we don't have to use so much into piercing. Increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. All damage over time that we have is increased. So you have to consider your Siphon, your Rend and Slashes. This, if you were to use it, the actual Dawnbreaker, which we don't actively use unless the target's nearly dead. Your Beast Trap is stronger, Poison Injection, Consuming Trap, Arrow Barrage, all that good stuff. Anything that we've got this damage over time is enhanced. Now, this one is very specific to the skills that we actually have, apart from a couple of them. This, whenever an enemy you are in combat with dies within 28 meters of you, you restore 200 magic and stamina if you have a Bone Tyrant ability slotted. So, on this front bar, we do not. But if you choose to, you could put Ruinous Scythe on here, like I said when I got to the skills part a moment ago, about Area of Effect heals and all that good stuff. So if you do have this on your bar, you will benefit from this recovery bonus if stuff dies. But we do have it on the back. We do have Necrotic Potency on the back. So while on the back bar, laying back down our dots or whatever, we will get this if stuff dies around us. Reduce the damage you take from damage over time abilities by 10% while you have a Bone Tyrant ability active. So, how is that useful to us? Here is a body. Let's consume it, and now we have a bonus on us. We actually had, for a very short period of time then, because it was only one body, we had Necrotic Potency running and healing this over time. Now remember that skill, the more bodies you consume, the longer the uptime on that heal. So while it is active, your damage over time intake is less. So in big ad pulls, if there's loads of dots on the ground and everything's dying around you and you start activating stuff like this, while it's active, you will benefit again from this passive. So make sure you have that. Increases your healing received by 2% for each ability of this skill line slotted. We have one, so we'll take the benefit from that. Or you'd have one on the front bar if you choose to. Failing that, you'll get nothing. And this one as well. Increases your max health by 1250. We only have 5 points into health. We do have health elsewhere in our build, but we also have this passive bonus here. So we don't have to dip so much in resources if we're using high recovery food as you might have to with another race or class, because we have a health bonus. Class, not race. Race is coming up. Now, we don't really use all of these, but they can be helpful. While you have a negative effect on you, your healing done is increased by 8%. So if you've got something negative of any flavor on you, your healing done is improved. So our necrotic potency actually goes up, and so does this if you are using the Blood Craze version. So that's important. While you have a Living Death ability slotted, which we do not, your critical chance with healing abilities is increased by 20% for the proportion of the severity of the target's wounds. What does that mean? If we have one of these skills on our bar, could do the mass res ulti, by the way. That's an oh shit button. You could use that. You will actually have stronger heals if you're lucky, because you'll have an extra chance to crit them. But we don't have any on the bar. So if you wanted to, you could put Mortal Coil on instead. You would lose the ability to gain the ultimate and reduction to damage from corpses, but you can grab just one corpse and get a massive heal over time. Recovery as well, and this passive will of course generate a higher chance to crit your heals as well. So you could use this if you really wanted to. This helps like hell to sustain as well if you really need to. So you put a corpse on the floor and Stam regen and heals, which is nuts. It's really fast heals actually. Very, very nice indeed. You don't have to use that, but that's a choice if you want to. And of course, as you can see, it costs nothing. It's free, just like Necrotic Potency. So ulti gain or heals and sustain. Your choice. But for doing so, of course, like I said, you will benefit from this passive. When you use an ability on a corpse, you generate 10 ultimate, and this can happen once every 16 seconds. Now, I'm going to show you this passive and the gain at the same time. Remember, 10 ultimate once every 16 seconds, which is quite high. And, of course, the 6 ultimate from the Siphon ability, from Necrotic Potency. Now, 224 we're on now. 240. 16 ultimate straight away. Every single rotation, we are actually going to be taking advantage of that. It's really, really mental. Now, of course, we've got one more to go. While you have a Blast Bone, Skeletal Mage, or Spirit Mender active, your Magic and Stam recovery is up by 200. So, as you can see here with the potion active on the front bar, not that the bar matters. 1651. That's our recovery. Have a Skeletal Mage active. 1979. Our recovery is a joke. It is ridiculously high. It's almost 2k. All you need is minor endurance from your group and you're going over 2k straight away. Easy as that. And our skeleton is going to be with us all the time, so we're always going to have that bonus, which is nuts. Now, other passives. This increases our damage of our dual wield abilities by 20% against enemies under 25% health. So our whirling blades, our rend and slashes, our light attack, and our heavy attack will contribute. This increases the weapon damage of your offhand weapon by 6%. Our offhand is weaker than our main hand, so this improves it. Reduces stamina cost of dual wield abilities. Of course, we want to get the cost down. Gives you a 15% damage bonus when attacking stunned, immobilized, disorient, or silenced enemies. So that will help when enemies are being CC'd. This one gives you bonuses based on the weapon you are holding. Each weapon of each type held will give a bonus. So if you have an axe held, which we do, you'll get a 13.7k damage over time over 6 seconds with an 8% chance to apply it. If you have 2 axes, there's a 16% chance. It's not a double strength dot, it's a double chance. Now if you have maces, of course it goes through physical resistances. That does actually double in strength. The sword is 3% per sword. That does actually double in strength. So if you have 2, it's 6, not 3. And the dagger is 1095, which means, yes, if you have 2 daggers, you get 2 crit bonuses. We're actually using 1 dagger and 1 axe. The axe blade did go back up again this update, so it's really, really nice. But if you're using the previous setup of 1 sword, 1 dagger, you're still absolutely fine. The bow passives, of course, we do want to get these. This gives you a damage bonus based on, obviously, the range you are currently at. So if you're further away, you can do up to 12% extra damage. That's important if you're inside mechanics. You want to kind of keep up certain procs for sets and all that good stuff. You want to keep light attacks up anyway, and the light attacks themselves and the damage from the other skills will be stronger. But of course, when you come back in, they'll level out again. But that is an important passive just for mechanics. Increases your weapon crit rating by 1095. That's exactly the same as the dagger, so we have the same crit bonus on both bars. Reduces the stamina cost of bow abilities by 15%. They are expensive. We want the cost down. Hawkeye. When dealing damage with a light or heavy attack, your bow abilities will increase in damage by 5%. And this can stack 5 times. And it will last 5 seconds per hit. But it will refresh. Each one will refresh. It doesn't stack time. It stacks damage. So you'll look at my buffs at the bottom there. You'll see a little eye in a pink circle. And there's 2. And there's 3. And there's 4. You can see the number in the middle of it. That will give you a 25% damage bonus, but as you can see, it's going to fall off. We will never be able to do that. Unless you are way, way away, hiding in mechanics and doing light attack poison injection just for the sake of spamming it until you can get back in again. Our rotation is going to allow us to do at least 3. But that will give us a 15% damage output to our bow abilities, and they will carry over when we swap bars until it runs out. So that will help us. Hasty retreat, of course, if you dodge roll, you get a speed boost. So, if you dodge roll, you run faster, of course, but do be aware that there is a negative effect to that, because if you dodge roll too often between dodge rolls, you will get an increased cost and you'll lose a lot of stamina. So don't dodge roll too much if you can help it. Always leave a 4-second gap. Next up, of course, is light armor. We are actually using 1 piece of light armor. So this will reduce the effectiveness of snares on us and reduce the cost of sprint, which is quite handy. This will increase your mag recovery. We are using 1 magic ability, and it reduces the cost as well. And this will increase your spell resistance for the 1 piece worn. So that helps us also. Medium armor, of course, you want all of these. We're using 5 pieces of medium. This will increase your weapon crit rating per piece worn. Yes, if you had 7 pieces, you would have a higher crit chance, but our crit chance is massive anyway, so it's not necessary. This will increase the stam recovery per piece worn. Again, we're almost at 2k stam recovery. We don't need 7 pieces, but you can take it if you want. And reduces the cost of stam abilities. This will improve your sneaking if you are doing that kind of stuff, so you can go for that if you want. This will increase your weapon damage by 15% for having 5 pieces worn minimum. And this will increase your movement speed per piece and reduce the cost of dodge roll. So get every single one of these. We're using 1 piece of heavy, so you want this for the resistance bonus. You want this for the constitution passive, which gives us 108 magicka and stamina back once every 4 seconds, so long as we're taking damage. And this will increase our max health by 2%. That is actually very, very important. If you do not have this passive here and a piece of heavy, so you have to have a piece of heavy to get this, and if you don't have 1 piece of light armor, you won't be able to take advantage of these Undaunted passives here, which will give you a 2% increase to all 3 resources, magic, stamina, and health, for each piece worn. So we've got a further 6% health here, plus the 2% from the heavy. If we didn't have that, we would be overall 8% down on our max health. We would have to take more points out of our stamina and put more points into our health. That would mean that our overall damage output potential would drop. So this is really, really handy. Make sure you get this as soon as possible. We're wearing 1 light, 1 heavy, and 5 medium. So that gives us our 16k health. If you don't have that 8% extra bonus, you're going to dip quite a lot, and you're going to have to find it somewhere else. Now, this, of course, is very important. This is for when you take synergies. Any synergy you take will replenish health, stamina, and magic. No matter what the synergy does, it will give you stuff back. Take the bloody synergies. They're not just for tanks. And any tank that says that they are is a moron. Take your synergies. They are used in this game to benefit you and your group. Sure, there may be a situation where the tank is asking for a spear, and the group politely doesn't take that particular one because he needs it right now. But apart from that, if he's not specifically saying, I need it desperately right now, send me one, you should be taking as many synergies as you possibly can. Every single synergy on the game is beneficial. It will do damage, it will shield you, it will heal you, it will do something that will help, and every single one individually has a 20-second cooldown. So don't worry, you can't scoop everybody else's, they can get them too. Now, of course, we did skip a couple, so we will go back a little bit. We are, of course, a vampire. Stage 4 on everything, but you don't need to be. You can actually be a stage 3 if you prefer, especially if you're scared of fire. But I use stage 4 on everything, all content. I don't struggle with it. It's personal preference. It's up to you. Just be careful inside mechanics. Now, we want it for this one, first of all. Stage 2 or higher, you would get an increased magic and stam recovery, which is why our stam is so high. Recovery, that is. And, of course, stage 3 or higher, if you take damage and you go below 50%, you take less damage the lower you go. So the lower your health is right now, the less damage you will take from incoming negative effects, and it can be a maximum of 33% reduction to overall damage that you take. So the lower you go, the tankier you get. It's really, really handy. Now, Fighter's Guild, of course, which I did also go over, but we need the passives. Intimidating Presence reduces the cost of Fighter's Guild abilities if they cost stamina. This does, we get the cost down, very handy. This one is very important because it increases your weapon damage by 3% per each Fighter's Guild ability slotted. Now, on the back bar, we don't have any, but on the front, we do. We have Beast Trap, which is really, really nice. And, of course, we have Flawless Stormbreaker. It lost its 5% damage overall bonus for being on the bar, but we still do get the 3% from here. So we've got a 6% bonus across the board on our front bar to our overall weapon damage. This one here, when you kill Undead, Daedra, or Werewolf, you will get 9 ultimate back for each kill. Now, just bear in mind, of course, once every 16 seconds, we get 10 ultimate back for consuming a corpse with any skill. And every single body that we consume with necrotic potency will give us 6 ultimate. You generate 3 ultimate every second for 8 seconds for every light or heavy attack you do, and it will refresh with each one that you apply. So that also contributes, and then again, if we kill stuff, we get 9 ultimate. It's disgusting, especially if you're firing Malcolm, because Malcolm is going to splat everything in the room. So get these passives. This one also, your Fighter's Guild abilities deal an additional 20% damage to Undead, Daedra, or Werewolves. That does apply, of course, to our Beast Trap and our Dawnbreaker if we have to use it in an emergency. Now, we are, of course, an Orc. This is very important. We have a max Stam bonus of 2k, which is huge. We have a 1k health bonus, which, alongside the Necromancer passive, puts us at 2250 extra health just for our race and class combo. Plus, we do heal off of our weapon abilities. That includes light attacks, heavy attacks, or skills with our bow or our dual wield. As you can see here, I just healed. Very nice. That happens once every 4 seconds. Also, don't forget, we do have a flat increase to our weapon damage overall, and we have a reduction to sprint cost and an increase to sprint speed. So we're fast, it's cheaper, we've got weapon damage, we've got health, we heal, we've got stamina. It's awesome. If you decide to go another race, of course, you are more than welcome to do so. Just consider what passives you will lose in order to swap out for another race. Also consider that our health bonus for our race and class combined, plus our 5 points into health, plus when I get to the gear, you'll see some more health. That is why we're on 16k. Any other race, you will possibly find a reduction if they don't have a health bonus. So you will have to jiggle your points more, and that may end up being a negative impact on your overall damage output. But it depends on how you play and what you do with your points and attributes. Now, of course, the most important passive in the game, medicinal use. Our potions last 30% longer, which means, of course, our major brutality, major savagery, and major endurance potions that we are using will last a full 47.6 seconds, which means the 45-second cooldown is avoided. We don't have any gaps. You can use this 100% of the time and keep those buffs up as much as you like. Really, really helpful. Now we're going to get into the gear. And you can be pleasantly surprised because it's almost the same as before. We are using Briarheart as a 5-piece. Axe on the main hand, dagger on the off, Just note, by the way, it doesn't matter what order they're actually in. However, what does matter is the traits. We're using Nernhoned on the main hand, which is important. It must be on the main hand because the offhand has less flat damage. And we have Sharpened on the offhand because of our champion points being somewhat manipulated towards our penetration values. So Axe and Dagger, and then 3 Jewelry. Although you can put this on the body instead if you prefer. As long as you've got 5 pieces on your front bar. We've got 2 Infused Jewelry and 1 Bloodthirsty. Now, the reason we want this on our front bar only, this gives us a crit bonus, a stam bonus, a crit bonus, and when you deal critical damage, which we will, you have a 10% chance to increase your weapon damage by a whopping 449 for 10 seconds, which is pretty good uptime. But, of course, this has a 15-second cooldown. Now, this is from as soon as it fires, so there can actually be a 5-second gap. It's not a 15-second gap, it's 5. But if we fire this on our front bar, we then get the most out of our damage output on our front bar. If we have this on our back bar and it fires on the back bar, there's a strong possibility that it could carry over to the front, and then, of course, we lose damage halfway through our rotation. So we want to make sure we can take the most out of this as we possibly can, so you want it front bar only. Just note, by the way, while this is active, not only does it increase your weapon damage for all of your abilities, but this also heals you every time you critically strike something. Now, the back bar, of course, is a Master's Bow from Vet Dragonstar Arena. So, instead of having to stretch yourself out and Maelstrom on your own, you can just go in and get some friends to help you, which is nice. There's a guide in my description section for this video, actually, also on the channel, if you want to go and get this bow. Now, you want it to be infused with an increased weapon damage and spell damage glyph on the back bar, because we're using Endless Hail, or Volley, or whichever you want to call it. Arrow Barrage, I believe we took them off of. When this is active, you'll see that I have a Berserker enchant running all the time. Any Area of Effect weapon abilities can reapply your glyph from the weapon that fired it, but single target ones do not. The initial hit will fire it, as you can see, but the damage over time, although it's still running, will not proc the glyph again. It's gone. So you need to keep up this skill all the time, so you can keep up that massive uptime on your major glyph there. You want to make sure that works. Now, the reason we've got infused, of course, is to be able to enhance that. The strength is higher, and the duration is longer, and the cooldown is shorter. So it's much better to have infused on this particular weapon than any other trait at the moment for this particular build, but over time, who knows? Maybe they'll change that. You can, of course, use a Maelstrom Bow if you prefer, if you have it already. It will be very nice. The damage output is actually great, especially in AoE situations, but single target, you will lose about 3k. Also note, if you don't have a Master's Bow or a Maelstrom Bow, you can put an Agility Bow on the back bar and you will be just fine for the time being while you are farming it. Yes, it will be less damage output, that is just how it is, but you have something you can put on there for the time being. Don't double Barbed Wire Heart because it will mess up your cooldowns. Also note, by the way, we do have a poison on our front bar. We don't worry about the glyphs. We're using these awesome poisons here which do damage over time twice. Really handy, so keep those on at all times. Now, of course, the Master's Bow, if you need to know how this actually works, if you fire a poison injection, you will actually have effectively 301 extra weapon damage to the targets affected. So as long as you've got this on target, you've got higher weapon damage. It doesn't show in your stats, but it does affect on the target's intake of damage. Now, we're using Veladreth on our head and shoulder monster set. You don't have to have Veladreth if you are struggling with the dungeon, for example, or you just haven't been lucky enough to get the shoulders. Who knows? If you don't have Veladreth, you can, of course, go for Stormfist instead, which has a stupid amount of recovery, and it does a nasty grabby hand proc from the ground, which explodes and does loads and loads of damage. Or this one, which does a disease spore kind of launch. You've seen it already a couple times. Look carefully. Those can only hit one per target. They can't all hit the same one. Just bear that in mind. But the difference is, of course, this one has a nice proc with a shorter cooldown. This one has a good proc with, instead of recovery, it has weapon damage. Just bear in mind, of course, this has a 9-second duration. This one has an 8-second duration before they can be fired. But this one does apply shock damage and physical damage. So although the physical burst is nice, the shock damage can apply minor vulnerability. So if you are using anything that isn't a buffed target dummy, you may see fluctuating effects with this because you can actually buff yourself with it. Also, just bear in mind, because of the shock damage from this, you can actually contribute towards concussion inside a fight, and that will actually help things go off balance. It's chance-based, but it's there for you anyway. But for the most part, if you want to go flat out, Veladreth did actually outperform slightly because of the increased weapon damage. But again, if you don't have it, Stormfist will be just fine. It's not a massive difference. Now, we are, of course, using Reliquins. This is not as important as you might think. It says perfected. Yes, the perfected version has an increased 1k max stamina, but you can use the regular version. Yes, of course, our flat resources are lower, which means we will, of course, have a slight drop in DPS overall. You won't hit the highest you can possibly hit because you don't have the perfected one, but it won't be the end of the world. It will be a small amount. Same as changing your attributes. Yes, you'll get lower damage if you have lower stamina, but no, it won't be the end of the world. But if you've got access to this, brilliant. If not, use the regular one. The regular one comes from normal Cloud Rest. There are pugs there going there all day long. Just keep an eye on local chat or, in fact, host your own. It's very, very quick to get in and get out and get it done. But this will give you a crit chance, 5% increase to all damage done in trials, dungeons, and arenas. 1k stamina if you have the perfected version. And your light and heavy attacks will put a spin-in wind effect on the target. You can only do it once every second, but you must keep the uptime of 5 seconds on it. So as you can see here, the whirly thing going off with the blue buff timer at the top there, lasts 5 seconds and runs out again. As long as you do one light attack or heavy attack at least once every 1 second, you will stack up another one and another one. And it will get stronger and stronger all the way up to 20. And as long as you consistently attack with lights or heavies inside your rotation, that will never run out. But if it does run out, it will fall off and you will lose all of your stacked up damage. And that can actually be the highest DPS output of the entire setup. It's very, very high. So if you have access to this or you go into normals and get the regular version, you do want to get used to light attacking or heavy attacking at least every 1 second to keep it stacked nice and quick. But at most, worst case scenario, you must fire a light attack at least every 1 5-second rotation of this wind. If you miss a light attack and you go over to 6 seconds, you lose it all. Now, of course, if you do not have this, or you do not preference it, or you haven't got enough practice in and you just can't work it and it just keeps falling off all the time, you can, of course, use Alkosh, which comes from more of Lorcage. Luckily for us, however, this doesn't have a perfected version. So you don't need to go into Vet, you can just go into Normal, loot all the bosses, loot all the ads, loot all the chests, and in no time you will have a full set of this. This is very similar in its first stats. It has a weapon crit bonus, minus Slayer, just like the last one. It has weapon damage instead of crit chance, but when you activate a synergy, you will actually apply damage over time to 6 targets that have been hit. Now, this will apply a really massive debuff in the form of a reduction to physical and spell resistance for the target's hit. 3-0-1-0 for 10 seconds. Now, it also can be reapplied with another synergy. So every time you pick up another synergy, it can just reactivate and that buff can have a really high uptime. But just consider this. This damage over time effect that comes from each cast isn't reapplied. They stack. So every single time you take a synergy, you'll have another 17k dot in area of effect in front of you. This is very, very effective if your group is capable of positioning their synergies effectively, and if you are capable of taking the synergies inside combat properly without messing up your rotation. Now, I've seen people try to practice this dummy with the one synergy that you get. Why is this not accurate? Because this is one synergy, and synergies have a 20-second cooldown. One synergy will mean that this duration of this debuff and dot will only be 50% of the time. However, if you have multiple synergies, you will see a dramatic difference. Just bear in mind, of course, however, when fighting the dummy, you could possibly supply some more synergies from your group with bone shields and damage effects and all that kind of stuff, but there are a lot of synergies in the game that come from heals and damage over time effects that need to be cleansed and all that good stuff. If you are going to see how effective this is properly, you need to use it in content, because this guy doesn't damage you, so you can't take advantage of the blood funnel, you can't take advantage of purify or button seeds or any of those. So there's 3 synergies already that you can't actually take on the dummy. So if you want to use it properly, use it in content. Versus a dummy, you're not going to see proper results. So just to show you what that looks like, in case you are unsure, aggro him, give me a synergy. Initial hit hits everything. 6 targets, however, are affected with the damage over time and the debuff. Very, very important to note. Also, just one more point. if you are not going for any trial stuff and you don't take part in it and you're not interested in the slightest, you can of course use some of the dungeon stuff. So Scavenging Demise is really, really good. That will apply minor vulnerability to the target for 15 seconds, increasing the damage of your group by 8% with a 10-second cooldown. So this can actually have 100% uptime. So that's really, really handy to buff your group if you don't already have that covered. And of course you've got Azura's Blight, which is a new set. When you deal damage with a damage over time effect, you apply a stack of Blight Seed to your target for 5 seconds and it stacks up to 20 times. So basically, as long as you're doing damage over time, this will stack up. And very, very fast as well, every single tick. Then it will explode in disease damage and area of effect. And then once it's exploded, 2 seconds after, it can reapply again. So this is also a really good choice here. Failing that, any crafted set you can get to hand for the time being. If you want to see how this works, this is very, very nice, actually. You can actually crack 85 to 90k without a trial set with this stuff on. So we'll put a dot on him. Every single tick it will catch, it will tick up. As you can see, look at the bluish kind of buff there. And then boom, in area of effect. Now, that didn't look like it built up very quickly. So we'll put some actual dots down now. Look for the explosion. There's one. There's two. Whoa, look at that. That was big. So once you get into it, massive, massive damage is disgusting. Do you know why that worked so well? Because the area of effect damage over time that's on the ground, it's not single target. It affects this target, but look on these. These have all got them as well. So if I put volley down, look at all these targets being affected with this stacking damage over time effect. Every single one of them with no cap is now about to burst with damage over time. It's really, really mental. So we'll keep this on. We'll make the skeleton explode. Here it comes. Boom! Check that out. And it's going to go again. Boom! So much damage, it's not even funny. So that's a choice you can make. If you want to use Reliquin for single target, go for it. If not, Alkosh is very, very good for debuffing and damage over time. But if you want to destroy rooms, you want Azura's on. It is absolutely nuts when you have ads in the room. Very, very strong indeed. Now, just to recap over traits and all that good stuff, you want Divines on everything. You want a heavy helmet and a light shoulders. Now, just note very carefully here, by the way, that we have 16k health. I have 5 points into health. I have the Necro passive for health and the Orc passive for health. And I'm also using a health glyph on my helmet. 954 health. This is not a Stam glyph. This is a health glyph. Next up is champion points. So, first of all, we'll start with the red ones. These you can change depending on the content you're in, but for everyday use, these are absolutely fine. 72 into Ironclad to reduce income and direct damage. 13% for both Hardy and Elemental Defender, so 64 points in each to reduce all damage that we take by that. 51 points into Thick Skin to reduce damage over time by 19%. And of course, we have the Unchained passive, so if we do get stunned and we have to break free, the next stamina ability we use will be 80% less in terms of its cost for the next 5 seconds, so use something really expensive there. 19 points into Quick Recovery to increase our healing received from all of our heals and other people's as well that we actually are affected by. And of course we have the Field Physician passive so that if you do resurrect someone, you will take 15% less damage while doing so. 44 points into Warlord to reduce the cost of Break Free. 75 points in Tenacity, so if we do heavy attack, we get more back. And of course 75 points into Mooncalf to increase our Stam recovery like we need it. 72 points into Tumbling to reduce the cost of Dodge Roll by 23%, and of course 4 points into Shadow Ward just to finish off the points that we're not using to give us a reduction to block cost, and of course we have the Treasure Hunter passive, so if you are farming gear, especially from treasure chests, you will have increased loot quality. Nothing in here, we're not using it. 66 points into Master at Arms to increase all of our direct damage done, including our lights and heavies, and this will also contribute to our lights and heavies as well. 56 into Thaumaturge to increase our damage over time. 21% into crit damage alongside our Mundustone of all of our divines, plus if we have a Warhorn and our buffs and bonuses from Minor Force as well in our own rotations and passives and such, we actually hit 100% crit damage on the nose. Pearson is at 35 points, not much more than it used to be. We have 1.5k penetration in our passives. We have 1.3 on our sharpened weapon. We do not need that much. So we can actually hit 18200 if buffed by our group, with our own stuff that we're bringing, with only 35 points in here, which is why we've got so many points to put into our other stuff, especially Master at Arms. 49 points into Mighty. I used to go 64 into here, but we really don't need to now because we've got a lot more with our flat and our dots alongside of our penetration, so everything balances out just fine. Now for the rotation. You want your beast trap down at all times. Minor force. You want your pet up at all times. For the extra penetration bonus from our passives. Now, when you first start the fight, the first thing you should really be doing is putting down your arrow barrage, poison injection, soul trap, swap bar. That's how you start your rotation. That's going to change slightly when we go into the full swing of it. We'll make sure the pet is still up. Now, the front bar is very simple. Light attack, blast bones. Light attack, rend and slashes. Light attack, venom skull. So that's 3 abilities with light attack between each. Light attack, blast bones again, because it's blown up now. Light attack, siphon. Light attack, reapply your beast trap. Light attack, blast bones again because it's exploded, and swap bars. So I'm going to do that again quickly. Light blast bones, light rendon, light skull. Light blast bones, light siphon, light beast trap. Like blast bones, swap. In that order, every single time you do that, you are guaranteed to get your blast bones in a perfect position after the cooldown is gone. Also, for doing so, you'll get your unstable parts passive when you swap bars, which means your pet will be cheaper. And when we get to the back bar, it will be like this. Arrow barrage, light poison injection, light recast the pet. Light necrotic potency, light soul trap swap. Now, I'm going to do that again. Arrow barrage, light poison, light pet, light necrotic potency to consume the pet, light soul trap swap. Now, how does this all work with our ulti gen? As you can see, our skeleton is thrown. So blast bones, light rendon, light venom. Then, blast bones again, light consume the dead one, light beast trap, light blast bones, and you can see we consumed a corpse, but now we've got one. Back bar, we would reapply the pet, consume both bodies, and then trap swap. Now we're going to do it quickly so you can actually see both bodies on the ground. So we'll wait until the skeleton has stopped firing at that stupid target, and we'll reset him. Sounds confusing, but basically it's all lined up together. The first blast bones will be consumed by your siphon. The second one will just explode for shits and giggles, and the third one will actually be what we consume our ultimate off of at the same time as we consume the recasted pet. So, we'll do this in order now. We'll just reset him. Watch my ulti regen. We'll actually get rid of Malcolm. So, start off as we mean to go on. Beast Trap and Pet should be up. Consume it on the second cast. Rendon, Skull. Pet. Consume the other body. Trap down. Pet again. Volley, light, poison, light, recast pet. Consume the dead bodies, soul trap, swap. Blast, light rendon, light venom, light blast, light consume the pet, light trap, light blast, light volley, light poison, light recast pet. We've got 2 bodies, consume them both. Trap and swap bars. Our rotation is smooth as hell. We have constant uptime on our blast bones to perfectly time it every time it grays out and then comes back again. We consume the second cast every single time with our actual siphon. We're guaranteed the venom proc of the third attack every bar. We recast the pet before it dies so we can then consume both dead bodies on the ground. And yes, if there are other dead bodies, you can consume them as well. That will give us a massive uptime on our whole rotation, keep our dots up, keep our target, our single target or AoE damage up, and of course give us freedom to use our Malcolm ultimate as much as we like. Just a tip, by the way, when you're doing your ultimate rotation, if you have to fire it, just be sure that you've done everything you need to do, got to soul trap, then fire it and swap bars. You don't want to fire it on your back bar, stay on your back bar and not take advantage of your burst damage on your front. So, now I'm going to show you a dummy rotation. Just bear in mind, of course, we are not using Loki, the set that gives you Major Slayer. So, we're missing a buff. So inside an actual scenario where you have your Trials team together and you have all the damage that you can possibly bring. You could have a Nightblade, a Templar, or a Warden beside you with War Machine or Master Architect. They're very good at keeping that uptime because they have such cheap ultimates. And they can supply you with that missing Major Slayer. So just consider that when this is done, although it's around the 95k mark, you can actually go way over 100 if someone else is supplying that buff for you without the need to actually put the Loki set on. So you don't need to go into Vet Scalecaller or anything like that to try and farm the perfected stuff if you don't want to. You can, of course, utilize it and you'll get roughly similar numbers. Or you can take advantage of a higher weapon damage bonus from Briarheart, get Major Slayer from somebody else, and still heal from your damage as well. Jigsaw puzzle, all slotting together. Very nice. Anyway, here we go. So hopefully that helped, hopefully that wasn't too boring, hopefully you now have a better understanding of how to approach this particular build. Just remember, there are options for your gear, and Azura is very, very nice in AoE situations, especially since it stacks on multiple targets, which is nuts. So, first of all, thank you all very much for watching. Hugely appreciate the support. If you are not subscribing already, please do hit that button. It is free. Furthermore, if you want to help support outside the channel, there are some links in the info section for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.